gently taking it from my hands. "Here, let me show you," he said, his fingers brushing against mine as he maneuvered the tent pole into place. That fleeting touch sent a spark through me that I tried to ignore. With Ethan's help, the tent was quickly erected, and we spent the rest of the evening gathering wood and building a fire. As twilight descended, the crackle of flames filled the air, mingling with the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. We sat side by side on the log we'd dragged into place near the fire pit, its warmth cutting through the crisp evening chill. In the glow of the firelight, Ethan's face seemed softer somehow, his eyes dancing with the shifting hues of orange and red. We talked about everything and nothing. Our voices, low and steady, as if speaking louder might disrupt something precious. When silence finally settled between us, it wasn't awkward or heavy, it felt alive, pulsing with things unsaid. Ethan leaned slightly forward, poking at the fire with a stick, his focus unwavering. I hesitated, caught in a moment where my thoughts felt both reckless and inevitable. My best friend, the person who had stood by my side through years of triumphs and failures, looked unreachable yet nearer than ever. Before I realized it, my words slipped out into the quiet night. "Ethan, have you ever felt like you're holding back something you can't even understand?" He stopped poking the fire, but didn't immediately reply. A long stretch of silence held us captive before he finally answered without looking at me. "Yeah, more often than I care to admit." His voice was low, almost a whisper, carrying a weight that felt heavier than anything he'd ever shared. The air between us shifted, charged with something potent and unfamiliar. My chest tightened as the words I'd resisted for so long clawed their way to surface. "Sometimes I think about us in ways that scare me," I admitted, unsure if he'd even want to hear them. Finally turning his gaze toward me, Ethan studied my face with an intensity that made my pulse race. His voice was calm yet deliberate when he responded. "I know what you mean. I've felt it too." Those simple words unraveled something inside me, breaking apart fears and defenses I hadn't realized I'd built. That night in the forest, as the stars watched overhead and the fire burned low, anything unspoken between us began to find its way out, and when morning came, we both knew there was no turning back. Life didn't wait for years or months to change. For us it shifted in one fleeting night that redefined everything we thought we understood about each other. That was how Ethan became more than just my constant. He became something impossible to put into words, but undeniable in every gesture and glances. Hand brushed against mine as he took hold of it. "No, genius, it goes here." The touch was fleeting, accidental, yet it sent a shiver through me all the same. I tried laughing it off, pretending my heartbeat wasn't racing. Soon enough, the tent stood firm, and we set about gathering wood for the fire. Sparks flew, flames roared alive, and smoke seeped into the night air of the clearing. Dinner was simple instant. Noodles cooked in the small pot we'd brought along. Yet somehow, the taste felt richer out there beneath a sky deepening into dusk. As the stars gradually shimmered across that velvet dark canvas overhead, Ethan leaned back on his elbows and exhaled with quiet satisfaction. "Sometimes I think I could live out here forever," he murmured softly, his tone lingering somewhere between thoughtfulness and yearning. I turned toward him without meaning to, my gaze settling on him longer than it probably should have. The firelight danced across his face, casting fleeting shadows along the sharp contours of his jaw and moving over the subtle curve of his lips. "Yeah?" I asked, feeling a tightness in my throat. "No noise, no rush. Just breathing," he replied, like he was letting something weighty slip free. I swallowed thickly. Maybe that was why we were out here anyway, to learn how to breathe again. He shifted slightly, his eyes meeting mine for a heartbeat that felt stretched beyond measure. Words fell away, replaced by the crackling of flames and an undercurrent of something undefinable yet palpable between us. It pulsed quietly, fragile but electric, daring and cautious. For an instant, I wanted to reach out, to close the space between us, to unearth feelings I had kept buried for years under denial or pretense. Before I could move or speak, the fire hissed with a sudden pop, snapping us from whatever moment had begun to form. Ethan turned away, his faint smile retreating as though nothing had occurred. Later that night, we crawled into our sleeping bags inside the tent. The minutes stretched as I lay in silence longer than I should have, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing beside me and feeling the world press close. The nylon walls of our tent brushing against us. The hum of crickets overlaying whispers of rustling leaves in the dark forest beyond. In that solitude, thoughts stirred restlessly against each other. I couldn't help but wonder what it might feel like to forget the facade, to stop pretending altogether. But whatever that vulnerability might have looked like remained untapped. Not yet, at least. That night nudged things into motion subtly at first, but I hadn't known it then. The next morning arrived with a shift I couldn't quite describe. The forest seemed alive in its own rhythm, the distant warble of birds, the creak of branches swaying in a soft breeze, the gurgling flow of water nearby merging with sunlight filtering gently through translucent fabric above us. I woke before Ethan did, catching sight of him bathed in morning light. It spilled golden and clean across his face as he stirred beneath it. Unable to stop myself for just a moment, I watched as his chest rose and fell steadily, his dark lashes resting against his skin. Something tightened not unkindly in my chest as I noticed what friends probably weren't supposed to. When he shifted awake and opened his eyes, I snapped mine away, hurriedly occupying myself with fussing over the zipper on my sleeping bag like it demanded my full attention. "Morning," he murmured groggily, his voice weighted by residual sleep. "Morning." I returned, quickly forced casualness coloring my tone too much by half-hours, if I weren't tangled up in all these contradictory feelings, bubbling beneath words unsaid. "Ready for day 2? "Always," Ethan said easily, stretching lazily upward until his shirt pressed taut, lifting slightly to reveal a slender sliver of pale skin at his waistline. My breath hitched for half a second before I forced my stare elsewhere, instead on how strangely fascinating stretched seams had suddenly become. By mid-morning, we packed lightly once more, in coffee and granola bars fueling us, and resumed forward along winding trails waiting ahead. The incline steepened noticeably throughout our trek that day. Dense trees flanked either side, while sheer ridges seemed threateningly close beyond. Careful footsteps gripping dirt beneath worn shoes. Surviving better than expected thus far against chances taken. Climbing harder terrain deliberately. Sweat dripped unapologetically down brows, but was welcomed in its honesty. My legs burned persistently, yet reminded me, even then, pushing harder matters deeply when momentum outweighs exhaustion. Hanging overhead, or somewhere hidden behind tense breaths. Fighting stubborn air, refusing shared respite, mid-layered heights, revealing promises beyond tired horizons written wider. Then his laughter echoed through the forest, loose and carefree, as if it could chase away the weight we both seemed to carry. But as the clouds overhead thickened, dimming the light that leaked through the canopy, the mood mirrored the shift in the weather. Our conversation continued, but quieter now, as if we both felt the storm lingering on the horizon, outside and within. When the first drops of rain hit the dirt path, I glanced up at Ethan. He was ahead of me, walking steadily, but his shoulders tensed at the sudden chill that crept into the air. We pulled our hoods up and quickened our pace, hoping to reach a natural shelter or a dry pocket to set up camp before the weather worsened. The rain fell harder, soaking through layers of fabric, and by the time we found a slight overhang of rock near a small stream, we were drenched. With clumsy, shivering hands, I helped Ethan pitch the tent under the limited cover. His hair clung to his forehead, droplets running down his face like tiny rivers. Even in the cold grey light, there was something about him that I couldn't look away from. Once inside, we both sat cross-legged in the cramped space, peeling off wet jackets and layering on as many dry pieces of clothing as we could find. The steady rhythm of rain on nylon filled the silence, drowning out my thoughts until Ethan spoke. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," he said lightly, though his voice carried a hint of something unspoken. I nodded, biting my lip. The tension between us felt as tangible as ever in the confined space. Every brush of his arm against mine, no matter how accidental, sent a ripple through me. Finally, with nothing left to distract us, I thought. Maybe this was the moment where everything would finally come to light, or where I'd retreat into myself again. "I don't mind," I whispered before I could stop myself. My words hung between us like a challenge. Ethan turned to me fully, his eyes searching mine for something. For permission? For courage? For clarity? I couldn't tell. The seconds stretched into eternity while the rain drummed its persistent song outside. "You know," he began softly, his voice barely audible over the storm, "I feel like I've been circling around something for a long time." He paused, rubbing his hands together as if to fend off a different kind of chill. "And being here, like this, it's making it harder to ignore." My heart pounded in my chest so loudly that I wondered if he could hear it. My throat tightened as I forced myself to respond. "What is it you've been avoiding?" My voice wavered slightly, betraying my own carefully guarded emotions. He gave a hollow laugh, glancing down at his hands. "I don't know if I should say it," he admitted. "It might change everything." The vulnerability in his admission sent a jolt through me, and suddenly, everything I'd been holding back for years bubbled to the surface. Words danced on my tongue, weighted with fear but laced with hope. The temptation to finally speak them was almost too much to bear. "Sometimes, change isn't a bad thing," I said softly. The words didn't feel entirely my own, they felt braver than I was. Ethan looked up sharply, his eyes locking onto mine like they were searching for confirmation. His hesitation was plain, so was his unspoken question. The intensity of the moment made me want to look away, but something in me held steady. If there was any chance, a single sliver of possibility, I wanted to meet it head-on. Eventually, he opened his mouth to respond. But just then, a clap of thunder shook the ground beneath us, jolting both of us out of whatever spell had been cast between our gazes. The moment dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Ethan laughed nervously and ran a hand through his damp hair. "Guess nature knows how to make an entrance." I smiled weakly, trying to mask my disappointment as he broke eye contact and shifted to check his pack. Despite how close we'd come to breaking through the silence that had stretched for so long between us, we were back where we started, floating adrift in a current of unrealized truths and unspoken words. The rain tapered off as evening settled in. We emerged from the tent to start dinner under a faintly clearing sky. Our movements more hesitant now, as though neither of us could decide whether to acknowledge what had just transpired or pretend like it hadn't happened at all. And so we carried on as before. Two people orbiting around one another. Our paths circling closer and closer together, but never quite intersecting. Not yet. Dinner passed in that same careful quiet. Both of us stealing glances when we thought the other wasn't looking. We spent the morning trading memories of the dumb things we'd done in college, laughter breaking through the monotony of the climb. But by afternoon, the air shifted. The forest grew quiet, too quiet as if even the birds sensed what was coming. The wind picked up, cool against the sweat on my neck. Ethan glanced upward. Storms rolling in. I followed his gaze. Dark clouds were piling fast, swallowing the sun and turning the sky ominous. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad enough. We should set up early." His tone had flipped-clipped, efficient. He always got that way when things turned serious. We quickened our pace, searching for flat ground, but the trail narrowed, hemmed in by rocks and trees. The first drops fell fat, cold pattering against the leaves. Then thunder cracked overhead, so loud it rattled my chest. "Here!" Ethan shouted over the rising wind, pointing to a small clearing. We dropped our packs and scrambled to pitch the tent. The sky opened up, rain pounding down and soaking us before we even managed to stake the corners. My fingers fumbled with the poles, slipping on the wet metal, but Ethan's hands were steady. Fast, precise. In what felt like seconds and hours all at once, the tent was up. We dove inside, dragging our gear after us, just as lightning split the sky and thunder rolled through the valley. Inside was chaos. The nylon walls shook with the wind. Rain hammered the fabric, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth and damp clothes. We sat there dripping and breathless, the storm raging just feet away. "Could be worse," Ethan said, half laughing, though his eyes still tracked the flashes of lightning. "Really?" I asked, shivering. "Because this feels pretty close to rock bottom. Rock bottom would be no tent." "Fair point," I admitted. We laughed, but the sound disappeared into the storm. Thunder boomed again, closer this time, and instinctively, I flinched. Ethan noticed. "You cold?" "A little." My shirt clung to my skin, damp and miserable. Without a word, Ethan unzipped his sleeping bag and opened it wide. "Come here. Body heat's the fastest way to warm up." My heart stuttered. I tried to play it cool, as if the adrenaline rushing through me wasn't real, but my voice came out uneven. "You sure?" "Yeah, unless you want hypothermia," he said simply. Already making space. Swallowing hard, I slid closer, easing into the warmth of his bag. Our shoulders brushed first, then our arms. Then, as the nylon crinkled around us, the length of our bodies pressed together. Heat radiated from him instantly, chasing away the chill but doing nothing to calm the storm inside my chest. The air felt too small, too heavy. Every nerve in my body was alive, acutely aware of every point of contact. His arm against mine, his breath brushing my cheek, his thigh pressed to my leg. We sat in silence, listening to the storm tear across the valley. The rain was deafening, the thunder shaking the ground, but all I could hear was the steady rhythm of his breathing. After a long moment, I whispered, "You ever feel like we're different out here?" Ethan turned his head slightly, his face inches from mine in the dim light. "Different how?" "Like everything's clearer, simpler, like the stuff we never say in the city is right there, waiting." His eyes searched mine, serious, unflinching. For a moment, I thought he would answer. I thought he would finally name what was crackling between us. But lightning flashed, blinding for a second, and he looked away. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know what you mean." Silence stretched again, filled with everything unsaid. My heart pounded so loudly I wondered if he could hear it. A sudden gust rattled the tent, and without thinking, I shifted closer. His arm moved around me instinctively, holding me steady. It wasn't playful. It wasn't casual. It was protective grounding. I froze, waiting for him to pull back, but he didn't. His arm stayed there, strong and sure. And I leaned into him just slightly, just enough to feel the solid warmth of his chest against my shoulder. "Ethan," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I meant to say. "Yeah." My throat closed. I couldn't get the words out, not like this. Not with the storm outside already feeling like it could tear us apart. "Nothing," I said instead. Shaking my head, he studied me for a moment longer, then nodded and let it drop. But he didn't move his arm. The storm raged on. But inside the tent, the world had shrunk to the heat of his body, the brush of his breath, the thundering of my own pulse. And I knew, when the storm passed, something between us wouldn't be the same. The storm eased some time before dawn. I knew, because the rhythm of the rain softened, then stopped altogether, replaced by the slow drip of water sliding from pine branches. The silence afterward was almost startling, like the forest was exhaling after holding its breath all night. I stirred awake, warmth pressed against my side. Caught in that haze between dreaming and waking, I didn't process it at first. Then I shifted and froze. Ethan's arm was draped over my waist. The realization jolted me fully awake. His body was pressed close, solid and warm, his chest against my back, his breath slow and even. The sleeping bag we'd shared had become a cocoon, and at some point during the night, we had stopped pretending to stay neatly on our own sides. I didn't move. I didn't dare. Every nerve in my body hummed with awareness. His fingertips rested lightly at my stomach, not gripping, not intentional, but there, intimate. I stared at the nylon ceiling, heart pounding, torn between staying perfectly still and the reckless urge to turn toward him. Minutes passed like hours, then Ethan shifted. His arm tightened around me almost imperceptibly, like his body knew something his mind hadn't voiced yet. His breath brushed the back of my neck, warm and unbearably close. I swallowed hard. Should I move? Should I speak? Before I could decide, he stirred fully. His arm flexed, loosening just a fraction. I felt the change in his breathing before he opened his eyes. Carefully, cautiously, I rolled onto my back. Forcing myself to look at him, our faces were inches apart. Ethan blinked against the dim morning light filtering through the tent. When his gaze focused on me, he didn't jerk away like I expected. He didn't make a joke or retreat behind sarcasm. He just looked deeply steadily, the kind of look that reaches straight into the marrow of who you are. For a long, suspended moment, neither of us moved. Outside, the forest murmured softly with dripping branches and distant birds. But inside the tent, the world narrowed to this, his eyes on mine. The tightness in my chest, the air thick with something undeniable. "Ethan," I whispered. His fingers shifted against my side. A small, steadying squeeze. "I know," he said softly. 2 words, and something inside me cracked open. Maybe neither of us thought past that moment. Maybe we didn't need to. One of us moved. Or both of us did. Suddenly, his lips were on mine. The kiss was tentative at first, fragile as morning light. His lips were warm, softer than I'd imagined in countless stolen daydreams. Hesitant, but full of a longing that matched my own. My hand found his jaw, brushing the roughness of stubble. Ethan deepened the kiss slightly, pulling me closer, and every wall I'd built over years of silence crumbled. When we finally broke apart, breathless, the world outside felt unreal. My pulse thundered. My body trembled. I searched his face, terrified of what I might see, but he wasn't pulling away. He was smiling. A small, nervous, hopeful smile that made my chest ache. "What now?" I whispered. He held my gaze, steady but softer than I had ever seen. "Now," he said. "We stop pretending." The words landed like sunlight after a long winter. I let out a shaky laugh. All this time, he confirmed, his thumb brushing the inside of my wrist. "I just didn't know if I did," I whispered, throat tight. "I do. I always have." He exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding that breath for years. Then kissed me against lower, deeper, full of everything we'd never said. My hand fisted in the fabric of his shirt, afraid he might disappear if I let go. But he didn't. He held me like he'd finally found something he didn't want to lose. When our foreheads came to rest together, we were both smiling like fools. "Guess that storm wasn't all bad," I murmured. Ethan gave a low, warm laugh. "Best damn storm I've ever been through." We stayed tangled for what felt like hours, even as the sun crept higher. Eventually, we knew we had to move, to pack up, to keep hiking, but neither of us rushed. The urgency that had always underpinned our friendship, the tension of everything unsaid, was gone. In its place was something steadier, something sure. When we finally stepped out of the tent, the forest looked different, brighter, washed clean by the storm. Water dripped from the trees. The ground sparkled with new light. Ethan walked beside me, our shoulders brushing, and for once I didn't force myself to step away. I didn't hide the way my hand lingered near his. At one narrow stretch of trail, he reached for me, fingers weaving through mine so naturally it stunned me. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. The rest of the day passed in quiet bliss. We hiked, we ate, we laughed, but everything felt different now. Every glance carried new meaning. Every touch was permission. Every silence was full, not heavy. That night, by the fire, under a sky glittering with stars, Ethan leaned against me, his head resting lightly on my shoulder. I didn't question it this time. I didn't panic. I simply let it happen. The world beyond the woods still waited the city. Our jobs, the unknown, but none of it mattered in that moment. All that mattered was the truth we'd finally spoken. And as I watched the flames dance and felt his hand slip into mine, I realized something I'd been too afraid to admit. That morning didn't just change everything between us. It changed everything inside me. The next morning we woke tangled together again. But instead of panicking or pulling away, we laughed, quiet, shy, but real. His smile reached his eyes in a way I'd never seen before, intentional and warm. "Sleep okay?" he asked, voice rough with mourning. "Best night I've had in years," I said, and it wasn't about the tent or the storm. It was about him. We packed slowly, dragging out the process as if lingering would hold the bubble around us a little longer. The trail that day wound through meadows dotted with wildflowers. Bees hummed lazily in the sun. Ethan stayed beside me instead of walking ahead, our hands brushing, sometimes intertwining. Each touch sent a quiet thrill through me, not sharp longing anymore, but something calm, something like peace. At a ridge overlooking the valley, we dropped our packs and sat shoulder to shoulder, legs dangling over the edge. Crazy how quiet it is, I said. It's like the world forgot about us, Ethan replied. Wouldn't be the worst thing. He raised an eyebrow. What? Live out here forever? Why not? No deadlines. No traffic. Just this, he chuckled. You'd last a week without pizza delivery. Okay, fair. But still. I get why you said you could live out here. It's freeing. His expression softened. It's not just the woods. Then what? It's being out here with you. That's the difference. Something inside me melted at his honesty. I leaned into him. He slipped an arm around me, and we stayed like that until the sun dipped low. That night at camp, the stars glittered overhead. Ethan traced slow patterns on the back of my hand. You know, he said quietly, I think we came out here looking for something. I turned to him, and I think we found it. Yeah, we did. We stayed there until the fire softened to embers, until sleep pulled us under dreams not of escape, but of beginnings. The next morning, we broke camp for the last time. Our packs felt lighter, our steps slower, as if neither of us wanted the trip to end. The closer we got to the trailhead, the louder the hum of the outside world grew. Metals, obligations, expectations. Think it'll feel weird? I asked. What? He said. Going back, after this. I gestured between us. He was quiet a moment, thoughtful. It'll be different, he said, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Different scared me and thrilled me. But looking at him, his steady gaze, the quiet certainty, realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not if it meant different with him. At the car, we set our packs down and stood there, the weight of everything unsaid settling again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was full. So, I said, how does this work? US. Back home. Ethan smiled, that same nervous, hopeful smile I had first seen in the tent. I don't know, he said, but I want to figure it out. With you? Yeah, I breathed. Me too. He stepped closer, brushing his hand against mine, not hiding it, not hesitating. And in the muddy parking lot, with our hair a mess, and days of trail dust on our boots, he kissed me again, sure and certain, a promise. This wasn't something we would leave behind with the tents and the trails. This was real. This was ours. The drive back was quiet, in the best way, full of a peace I didn't know how to name. Every so often, he reached for my hand, giving it a small squeeze. And every time my heart leaped. The city rose on the horizon, tall buildings breaking the endless green. Part of me wanted to turn back, but the bigger part knew what we had found wasn't tied to the woods, it was tied to us. Outside my apartment, the moment stretched long. This isn't the end, right? Ethan asked. I shook my head. No, it's the beginning. He leaned in, kissed me softly. Good, he murmured, because I'm not done with you yet. I laughed, breathless, as I stepped out of the car. I realized my life had split into 2 chapters, before the tent, and after. And everything after was brighter. Love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it hides in friendship, waiting for the right night, the right storm, the right morning. We went into the woods as friends. We came back as something more. And that morning, the one that changed everything, was only the beginning of